In today's video, we're going to break down everything that happened in Action Comics number 1087, which from this issue onward will focus on the adventures of Clark Kent before he became Superman. The story begins in Metropolis at an event called the Tomorrow Expo. Perry White, now serving as the mayor of Metropolis, had requested that Superman and Supergirl participate in the event, offering young people a hopeful glimpse into the future through technology. Superman had the idea to include equipment from the Legion of Superheroes to create flying experiences for visitors, especially young ones, giving them an optimistic peek at what lies ahead. The whole show made Clark fondly remember the time when, as a boy, he visited the expo with his parents. To get the most out of the experience, he changed outfits and resumed his identity as Clark Kent. He wanted to blend in as a regular person, taking in the sights, sounds, and nostalgic feelings. Nothing in his long life had made quite the same impression as that first visit to the expo. That visit had taken place on June 18th, a date he always considered his birthday, since it was the day the Kents found him in the fields. In that memory, a 15-year-old Clark was rushing his parents, pushing them onto the bus with a ton of enthusiasm. He was eager to arrive early, super excited to see the cars of the future and the scientific attractions. But along with that youthful excitement came a bit of impatience. He couldn't understand why his parents wouldn't just let him fly them all the way to Metropolis. Jonathan and Martha, on the other hand, saw this as a chance to teach patience and responsibility. They wanted Clark to have normal experiences, even though he wasn't a normal kid. They were fully aware that their son carried the world's greatest secret, and he had to be prepared emotionally and strategically for the day the world would find out who he really was. During the trip, Martha scolded Clark for already wearing his Superboy costume underneath his clothes. He tried to justify it by saying that something might go wrong in Metropolis, and he just wanted to be ready to help. Jonathan stepped in, firm but understanding, reminding him that knowing the right moment to act was part of what it meant to be a hero. Clark calmed down after hearing that, and once in Metropolis, he used his telescopic vision to scan the distant buildings, recalling how, at just 6 years old, his powers had first begun to show and how patiently his parents had helped him master each one. Once they got to the expo, Clark walked a little more slowly now, remembering his parents' advice: hold back, observe carefully, and avoid causing any accidents in the crowd. At the start of the visit, the family decided to begin with the historical pavilions focused on past heroes. Jonathan, feeling nostalgic, turned into a walking encyclopedia of the Justice Society, telling Clark over and over how Green Lantern Alan Scott had defeated Solomon Grundy, or how the first Flash, Jay Garrick, had saved entire cities. Those were the heroes of Jonathan's youth, and he wanted his son to understand the legacy he carried. As the Kent family explored the expo, their moment of peace was abruptly shattered by a violent explosion. The noise echoed across the fairgrounds, followed by the arrival of a threatening figure, Rays. The villain marched through the crowd, shouting that the future wasn't as bright as the expo claimed. To him, what lay ahead for humanity was only darkness and ruin. And the worst part? That future had already arrived, as he began using his powers to tear the place apart. Amid the chaos, Jonathan looked at Martha and gave Clark permission to step in. So the boy slipped away and, out of sight, changed quickly. As the villain hurled a massive boulder at the civilians, calling them fools who didn't deserve a future, that same boulder was suddenly stopped, and everyone was shocked to see a kid holding it up. Yes, Clark didn't have a proper costume yet, so he was wearing an ordinary blue t-shirt with a makeshift hope symbol, a red cape sewn by his mom, and worn-out red sneakers. It was a raw version of what would one day become the Superman suit. Throwing the massive boulder into a nearby river, Clark approached Rays and tried to resolve the conflict peacefully. He asked him to stop before more people got hurt, but the villain ignored the plea, and struck the young hero with a strange, invisible blow that sent Clark flying and made him bleed. It was the first time Clark had ever felt pain. It left him completely stunned, because until then, nothing had ever physically harmed him. Reyes took advantage of the young hero's hesitation and, using his telekinetic powers, hurled Clark into a nearby booth. During the fight, he taunted the boy, suggesting that he wasn't from this world and showed interest in knowing who, or what, Clark really was. Still inexperienced in combat, Clark wasn't sure how much force he could use without putting lives at risk. He didn't know the limits of his own strength and feared hurting someone more than necessary. That's why he stopped his own punch halfway through, afraid of what might happen to Reyes. That hesitation nearly cost him. Reyes had no such scruples. He kept attacking mercilessly, leaving Clark dazed. As he tried to collect himself, the boy heard through the chaos the cries of people calling for help. That sound shook him more than any punch. He wanted to respond to everyone, save everyone, but he was overwhelmed. That's when he heard Jonathan's voice in his mind. He remembered his father's advice, words of calm and focus. Inspired, Clark rose to his feet. He saw a woman about to be hit by an energy blast and acted fast, saving her just in time. Then, using his super speed, he created a whirlwind around Reyes, spinning a tornado strong enough to disorient the villain until he collapsed, drained. Yes, Clark hadn't hit him hard. He chose to use the environment, the wind, technique, and strategy. When Reyes fell, Clark tore off his helmet and realized it was amplifying the villain's powers. With the threat temporarily neutralized, he tried to get answers, demanding to know who the bosses were that Reyes had mentioned repeatedly. But the man, overtaken by fear, refused to answer. With the danger seemingly under control, Clark began to notice something just as frightening as the battle itself. People were surrounding him. Curious stares, phones in hand, requests for photos, and questions about who he was began to pile up around him. But still unready to face the world as a symbol, Clark chose to vanish, using his speed to disappear from everyone's view. Shortly afterward, he returned to the expo in his civilian clothes, as if nothing had happened. When he reunited with his parents, Martha and Jonathan were proud of how Clark had saved hundreds of people. But they were also worried, not about his injuries, but about the fact that Clark had been seen. The secret the family had protected for years had now been partially exposed. People had seen him in action, and that could bring unpredictable consequences. For example, the next day, the city had already started talking about the red and blue strange boy who saved the expo. But it wasn't just civilians and reporters paying attention. In a dark corner, far from the public eye, a mysterious organization had also taken notice of his appearance. And among its members was none other than General Sam Lane, now under orders to find out who the young superpowered individual in Metropolis really was. But more than just drawing the attention of the media and the authorities, Clark's emergence as Superboy also disturbed someone lurking in the shadows. In a final revealing sequence, a powerful figure watched the news with contempt. To this person, what Clark had done wasn't heroism, it was recklessness. He hadn't protected people the right way, and for that, he needed to be stopped. Even more unsettling was that this observer wasn't just offering opinions. He had powers, and he was determined to confront the Boy of Steel,